So I'm going to give you 5 P's. Now, I know that some other people have come up with ways of doing the examen, and if you Google the word Jesuit examen or the words Jesuit examen, you're going to hear a lot of different ways of doing this. But why this is so important is because how can we know what's going to happen in the world, what we should do corporately as a larger entity, if we're not interiorly aware of what's going on in our life? And we do that by this regular examination. And it's not just sort of an examination of conscience of where have I gone wrong, but really it is a noticing of God's action in our life. Like Isaiah, the first action isn't to speak, it is to listen, it is to notice, it is to pay attention, it is to be aware. And so these 5 P's in order of the examen, the first is presence. Focus on the presence of God here and now. We might not necessarily feel God's presence in the way that we feel somebody sitting right next to us, but to focus on God's presence, to recognize that all of creation is imbued with the glory of God, as Gerard Manley Hopkins says, this beautiful sense in which God is palatable in all things, and just simply to come to an awareness that God is present, whether it's here and now at church or when you're in your van going home, or maybe as you wake up tomorrow morning, to any of those moments. As a side note, Jesuits are asked to do this twice a day for 15 minutes. But that's a good goal. I'm still working on it, and I've been doing this for 15 years. If it takes you, at first all you got is 5, good. If all you got is 1, good. But take that time to acknowledge and be present in that moment to recognize these steps, if only just for 1 minute. And it begins by acknowledging God's presence. And then Ignatius says that the greatest of all sins is the sin of ingratitude. And so the second step is to give praise to God, praise of thanksgiving. Let us be mindful of the gifts that God has given us. The gifts of family, the gifts of service through the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, the gifts of being able to participate in a world and in a place in this moment, even if it's broken and shattered and has all of these other things, it is still kind of a gift to be able to be here and to be with all of you. And after you've paused for Thanksgiving, this praise of Thanksgiving, pay attention. That's the third P. Pay attention to what's moving in your heart and in your mind. I think too often people think that in order to pray, you have to be, laser focused. And a better example of prayer and paying attention is sort of like sitting on the edge of a river. That there are a lot of things that will be sort of floating by, right? If you've ever, gone to the Mississippi River and you kind of see, there's leaves and trees and, other things maybe floating in the river, some of it important and some of it just sort of drift as it goes along. And the focus isn't trying to figure out that one thing you're supposed to focus on, but just sort of to take it in gently with praise, with love. Just pay attention to what's being moved in your heart. You might notice, that conversation I had yesterday, that's still in my mind. Good. Or you might notice, I'm really upset by the news lately, what happened in Minneapolis, that I feel like something needs to be done, the police and everything that's going on. Like, good. Notice that. But if other things come to mind, much as the river continues to flow, allow it to flow past you, because the things that will strike your imagination will stand forward. And then the one thing that sort of like really you hold on to, you keep going back to as you watch this river, present that for God, the fourth P. Present it to God. And because at the end of the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, he kind of has all of the retreatants pray this beautiful prayer of surrender. That all that we've been given, all of the gifts and talents, they're not ours. We don't possess them. We surrender them. We give them back to God, that they can be transformed, that our hearts maybe be moved, that the action kind of stem from within and to see what is going on in our hearts and in our minds. Then we propose to God what we want to do with that, what God might, hand back to us in those moments. So sit in the presence of God. Pause for thanksgiving. Pay attention, present, and propose.